Helen Smith had never believed in fairy tales. Not since she was old enough to know her father wasn't coming back, and her mother cried more than she smiled. At 22, she had grown into a quiet strength, beautiful in a way no one noticed unless they truly looked. She had ocean blue eyes that held hidden storms, and a laugh that only came out when she forgot how hard life had been. Her world was tiny, a rented studio above an old florist shop. Two jobs, one as a waitress at a rundown diner, and the other stocking shelves in a cold, silent grocery store at night. Dreams? She kept them in a notebook by her bed. She never spoke them aloud. In Helen's town, dreams were like glass, too easy to break. And love? She had tried it once with a mechanic who called her baby, but cheated behind her back. Then with a college boy home for summer who never called after Labor Day. Love, she believed, was like rain in August, unexpected and always fading. But that night, that soft, moon-washed night, something changed. It was her best friend Lucy's birthday. A backyard party with string lights glowing like little captured stars. Old songs played from a Bluetooth speaker. There was laughter, dancing, the smell of cheap pizza, and perfume hanging in the air. Helen stood near the back fence, sipping from a red plastic cup. She was wearing a faded denim jacket and a white sundress she hadn't worn in years. Her blonde hair was messy, but the wind made it look like it belonged that way. A group near the fire pit started talking about love. Real love, movie love, once-in-a-lifetime love. Helen rolled her eyes and laughed. Ugh, I give up. Maybe I'll just marry the next guy who walks up and says hi, she said, joking. The group laughed. Then in a moment of silliness, she raised her cup and said louder, Hey, anyone want to get married? It was a joke, a silly, tired joke. Her eyes sparkled with sarcasm. The laughter died down a little. And then, I do, a calm voice replied from behind her. Her body stiffened. She blinked. Someone had actually answered. Slowly she turned. Her breath caught. The man standing there wasn't just any man. It was him, Jack Wilson. The Jack Wilson, billionaire tech genius, 32 years old, founder of a company worth billions. Tall, rugged jawline, silver cufflinks, a dark coat that looked expensive even in the dark. His face had been on Forbes, Time, and even that big Sunday magazine her mom kept on the table. What was he doing here? Why was he at this party? And more importantly, why was he looking at her like that? He wasn't laughing. He wasn't mocking. He was smiling. A soft, amused, curious smile. Helen's voice cracked as she asked, Wait, are you being serious? He nodded slowly. I liked the way you asked. It felt honest. Someone snorted nearby. Helen's cheeks burned. You're Jack Wilson, she muttered half to herself. Yes, he said simply. What are you doing here? I'm Lucy's cousin. I'm rarely in town, but she begged me to come. Told me I needed to loosen up. He chuckled, and for a moment, he didn't look like the man from the magazines. He looked real. Helen's heart pounded. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. I was joking, she whispered. I wasn't, Jack replied. The way he said it, steady, clear, like he meant every syllable, made her throat tighten. They stood there, two strangers under the stars, the world around them blurring into background noise. She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or run. But she didn't do either. Instead, she smiled, nervously. Well, you sure know how to crash a girl's joke. I didn't mean to crash it, he said gently. But maybe it wasn't a joke to begin with. Helen's chest tightened. That sentence clung to her all night. Long after the music faded, long after Jack had walked away to take a phone call, long after she got home and sat on her small bed, staring at the stars through the tiny window above her pillow. She touched her lips without meaning to. He hadn't kissed her. He hadn't even touched her. But somehow, he had already left a mark. That night, Helen couldn't sleep, because for the first time in her life, she wondered what it would feel like to be seen. Not just looked at, but seen, deeply, truly, and somewhere across town, in a penthouse suite above it all, Jack Wilson stared at a photo he'd taken secretly on his phone. It was her, smiling under the string lights, completely unaware of the glow she gave off. And he whispered to the empty room, "I think I just found the woman I never knew I was looking for." "You're joking, right?" Helen asked, her voice shaky, her laugh unsure. Her hand reached up to tuck a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she hadn't outgrown since high school. She had asked that marriage question as a joke, loud enough to make people laugh, not loud enough to catch a billionaire's heart. But Jack Wilson was standing there, tall and confident, looking at her like she had just said the most beautiful thing in the world. "I'm not joking," he replied gently. "You said it like you meant it." "Maybe I want to say yes." Helen stared at him. Her heartbeat was in her ears. This didn't happen in real life. This wasn't a movie. This was her, the tired waitress from a tiny town with no fairy tale written for her. "You're serious?" she asked, her throat dry. Jack's smile widened just enough to be warm, not cocky. "Let's find out how serious you are. Come walk with me." She hesitated for only a second, then nodded. They left the party behind. The music, the lights, the half-empty pizza boxes. Just two people walking into the quiet night. The streets were empty. Even the dogs in the neighborhood had gone to sleep. They passed shuttered diners with chipped paint, a bookstore with handwritten signs, and a gas station glowing like a tiny moon. Jack kept his hands in his coat pockets, but his eyes never left her. "So," he asked, "what's your real life like, Helen Smith?" She looked down at the sidewalk. "Nothing exciting. I serve pancakes in the morning and mop tile floors at night. I read old romance novels and write dreams I can't afford." He tilted his head. "What do you dream about?" She almost didn't answer, but something in his voice felt safe. "Opening a small cafe with books and candles and soft music. A place where people feel warm again." Jack's eyes lit up. "That doesn't sound small. That sounds beautiful." Helen smiled, caught off guard. They walked a few more blocks before she asked, "What about you? What's it like being you?" He paused for a second, his steps slowing. "It's loud," he said softly. "Even in silence. People expect you to be perfect, but they don't care if you're happy." She looked at him then, really looked. He had the money, the status, the face everyone knew, but behind his blue eyes, there was loneliness. "What's your favorite memory?" she asked suddenly. Jack looked surprised. "No one's ever asked me that," he admitted. Then he smiled, a faraway look on his face. "When I was 10, I built a treehouse with my dad. It collapsed in the rain. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. I haven't laughed like that in years." Something heavy yet warm settled between them. Two strangers sharing truths that felt too big for a first conversation. Time disappeared. The sky turned darker, and stars blinked above like tiny promises. Eventually, they reached a small park at the edge of town. Empty swings, cold benches, the smell of earth after sunset. They sat on a bench that creaked under their weight. Helen rubbed her hands together, her voice soft. "You'd never marry someone like me?" Jack turned toward her, his voice a whisper. "You don't know me." Their eyes locked. No games? No lies. Just two tired hearts daring to be real. And then he leaned in. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry. It was slow, thoughtful. A kiss that felt like pages being turned, like someone writing a poem in the dark, like hope rising where none had lived before. Helen's eyes fluttered shut. His lips were warm, and for one quiet moment, the rest of the world disappeared. When they pulled back, he looked at her like he was memorizing her face. "Does that feel like I wouldn't marry someone like you?" he whispered. She couldn't answer. Her voice was caught in her chest, but her eyes said everything. It wasn't about money anymore, or fairy tales, or what made sense. It was about something she hadn't felt in years, being wanted, exactly as she was. The bench creaked again as he stood, holding out a hand. "Walk you home?" he asked. She nodded, placing her hand in his. Their fingers laced together like puzzle pieces finding the right fit. And as they walked through the sleeping town, their shadows stretching behind them, one thing became clear. That night was no accident. It was the beginning of something that would challenge them both, a spark that would grow into fire, and a kiss that would change everything. The world changed overnight. For Helen, it was a Thursday morning like any other. She tied her apron behind her back, yawned into her coffee cup, and grabbed her notepad from her pocket. She had tables to serve, smiles to fake, tips to chase. The diner was half full, construction workers, a lonely old man reading the paper, and a couple on their third awkward date. And then the bells above the door jingled. She didn't look up at first, but the air changed. Silence swept across the room like a breeze before a storm. The whispers started. "Oh my God, is that?" Helen turned, pen still in her hand. Her breath caught. It was him. Jack Wilson, wearing a navy coat and no tie, walking straight through the door like he belonged there. Behind him were cameras, news crews, bloggers, even paparazzi who had driven across the state. "What?" Helen said, stunned. Jack stopped in front of her. He didn't smile. He looked serious, focused, almost nervous. He dropped to one knee. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a coffee mug. Helen's heart stopped. She wanted to run, or cry, or laugh, or all three. Jack pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, but shining like stars. The camera lights flashed. Phones recorded. Voices whispered. But all Helen could hear was his voice. "Marry me," he said, steady and true. "I don't care if we just met. I don't care what the world says. I've met 100 models, 1,000 liars, but you made me feel like a person again. You made me feel seen." Helen's knees trembled. She remembered their kiss under the stars, his hand in hers, the way he had listened to her dreams like they mattered. Tears filled her eyes. This was insane. This was impossible. This was real. She knelt with him. "I say yes," she whispered. "Yes." The diner exploded in cheers. Cameras clicked like firecrackers. The news was out within minutes. By sunset, her phone had over 300 messages. "Billionaire Jack Wilson proposes to small-town waitress after one night." The headline was everywhere, from gossip blogs to primetime news. Some called it romantic. Some called it reckless. Some called it a publicity stunt. Helen's parents were the first to call. Her mother's voice shook. "Sweetheart, are you being paid for this?" Helen's heart dropped. "No, Mom. He means it." Her father's tone was worse. "Are you sure you're not being used? Billionaires don't just show up and marry waitresses, Helen." Her stomach twisted. The doubts came fast. Old co-workers, old classmates, people she barely remembered, suddenly remembered her. "Is it real? Are you pregnant? Did you trick him somehow? Are you sure he's not making a fool out of you?" But Helen stayed calm. She knew what they didn't. Jack wasn't pretending. He wasn't acting. That night they sat alone in his car, far from flashing cameras. No diamonds, no suits, just them. She stared out the window and asked, "Why me, Jack?" He took her hand, kissed her knuckles gently and said, "Because when you looked at me, you didn't see a billionaire. You saw a man who needed to feel human again." She cried then, quietly, because no one had ever loved her for her soul before. And just when she thought love would be enough, the real storm came. The hate. Not just the disbelief, but the whispers. "She's not classy enough. She probably can't even hold a wine glass right. She's not from the same world. She'll embarrass him. She's just a waitress." But then came the worst ones. Low voices, careful tones. They looked too similar. Wouldn't it have been better if he married someone from another background? Two white people with money? That doesn't make a statement. That's just privilege protecting itself. Helen didn't know what to say. She was poor. She had grown up with holes in her socks and frozen fingers in winter. What privilege? She hadn't chosen her skin, or her town, or her quiet, invisible life. But now, even her love was being questioned by a world that wanted a different headline. They wanted shock, diversity for spectacle, a picture that meant something on paper. Jack stayed silent in public. No interviews, no comments, no responses. But Helen saw the storm in his eyes. One night she found him on the balcony of his penthouse, fists clenched, jaw tight. "You okay?" she whispered. He turned, eyes filled with unspoken fire. "I didn't know loving someone would mean defending them to the world," he said. Helen walked to him, placed her hand on his chest. "You don't owe anyone a reason to love me," she said. "But I'm not afraid to fight." Jack looked at her then like he was falling all over again. "We'll fight together," he said. And under the stars once more, they held each other, not because their love was perfect, but because it was theirs, and no whisper in the world would break it. Living in Jack's mansion felt like stepping into a dream, but it wasn't the kind you woke up smiling from. It was the kind where you ran down shiny hallways and still couldn't find peace. The place was huge, marble floors, walls of glass, rooms Helen didn't even know how to use. Every window reflected her face and the world watching it. She tried to stay grateful, tried to smile when the cameras peeked over the gates, tried to laugh during interviews. But fame wasn't pretty. It was sharp, and it cut her quietly. The online comments were the worst. "She's so plain. Money can't buy class. She's faking it. She probably trapped him. She doesn't deserve him." She read them at night when Jack was asleep beside her. Her tears soaked into silk pillowcases she had never asked for. Even walking through the grocery store meant whispers and phone cameras. She started wearing sunglasses, but people still stared. And then the exes started talking. Women Jack had once dated, models, actresses, heirs. They appeared on TV laughing. "Oh, I remember Jack. So intense. So fast with his feelings. I give it 6 months," one smirked. "She's not his type at all." Helen watched it all with her hands in fists and her heart sinking. She didn't care about the fame. She cared about them, about their little world, and it was starting to break. Jack saw the change in her. She was quieter now, didn't hum when making tea, stopped dancing barefoot in the kitchen. He hated it. Then came that interview. A popular host with sharp teeth hidden behind a perfect smile called Helen a curious choice for a billionaire, live on air. The audience laughed. Jack was watching from the hallway. He didn't say a word, just turned off the TV, walked into the room, took Helen's hand, and said, "Let's disappear." Her eyes widened. "What?" "Let's get away. From all of it. Just you and me." Within hours, a small private plane took off from the city. No staff, no security. Just 2 bags, a beat-up duffel, and a simple engagement ring. They flew into the cold, into silence. A cabin in the mountains waited for them. Wooden walls, crackling fireplaces, and a view of snow-kissed trees. No internet, no headlines. Only nature and quiet. For the first time in weeks, Helen exhaled. The first night, they lay on a couch under a thick wool blanket. The wind howled outside. Inside, only the fire spoke. Jack stared into the flames, quiet for a long time. Then his voice cracked. "I've never had peace before," he said. "Even as a kid, everything was noise. Money, pressure, people wanting things. Then I met you, and suddenly I could breathe." Helen turned to him. He looked tired, not like a millionaire, not like a businessman, but like a boy who had spent years trying to be perfect and finally couldn't anymore. Tears lined his eyes. "I didn't bring you into this to hurt you," he whispered. "I brought you into my life because you're the only person who sees the real me." Helen held his hand, tight. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You gave me love when no one else looked twice at me," she said softly. "You made me feel like I was more than a waitress, more than average. You gave me home, Jack. I'm not going anywhere." He turned to her, eyes full of emotion. "I can't promise I'll always get it right, but I can promise I'll never stop choosing you." She nodded. "I promise too. I'll love you, even when the world hates it." They sat like that for hours. No gold, no cameras, just wood and snow and 2 people promising to hold each other through the storm. That night, as the snow thickened and the fire dimmed, they made love, not in luxury, but in trust. Every kiss said, "I see you." Every touch said, "You're safe." They built something stronger than glass walls. They built truth. The next morning they sat on the porch, hot cocoa in hand, wrapped in one blanket. Helen rested her head against Jack's chest. "This is my favorite place in the world," she whispered. "Why?" he asked. "Because here I'm just yours. Not a headline, not a scandal, just yours." Jack smiled, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like a man in love. The world had a way of throwing stones. It didn't matter that Helen and Jack had found something pure, something real. The stones came anyway. It started with a letter. One night after dinner, Helen found a small, unmarked envelope tucked under the door. She froze for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. The handwriting was sharp, scratched into the paper like it was meant to hurt. "You're ruining him. He belongs with someone of his class, someone better. You will never be good enough for him." The words sliced into her chest like a blade. Her vision blurred, her stomach twisted. The weight of the world, the endless whispers, the hate, the doubts, poured into her heart all at once. She had always known people whispered, but this was different. This was a direct hit. The world didn't want her to be with Jack. The world didn't want them to be happy. They didn't care about love. They only cared about class. Helen sat on the floor staring at the note, her hands shaking. A suffocating silence filled the room. She wanted to fight it. She wanted to tell herself it was just one cruel person. But the letter had gotten under her skin. It made her wonder. What if they were right? Her mind raced. Was she ruining him? Had she taken him too far from his world? Was she too ordinary, too small town? Was she really enough for someone like him? In a haze of pain and confusion, Helen packed a small bag. A few clothes, her old journal, a photo of her and Jack on their first trip together. She slipped out of the house quietly, as if she were sneaking away from a nightmare. It was 2 a.m. when she left. She didn't tell Jack where she was going, didn't tell him why. She drove for hours back to the town where she grew up, the small diner with its faded neon lights. The same street she had walked 1,000 times, her footsteps echoing in her memory. She pulled into the parking lot, the place now closed for the night. It looked so much smaller now, so much emptier. Helen sat on the curb outside, her head in her hands, sobbing quietly into the darkness. She wasn't enough. She never would be. And that was the cruelest truth of all. Hours passed, and the rain started falling in thick, heavy sheets. She didn't care. It felt like the world was washing her away. Jack had called, over and over, but Helen didn't answer. She couldn't face him. Not like this. Not when the pain was too much to explain. But Jack didn't stop looking. His mind raced, trying to figure out where she could have gone. He tried calling friends, checking familiar spots. And then he remembered. He drove straight to her hometown. By the time he pulled into the parking lot of the diner, his coat was soaked. He saw her sitting there in the rain, her shoulders shaking, her small, fragile figure alone in the darkness. Without a word, he rushed to her, kneeling beside her. His hands cupped her cold face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. "Helen," he whispered, breathless from the cold and worry. "Why'd you leave?" She couldn't speak at first. The pain in her heart was too strong, too raw. She tried to pull away, but Jack wouldn't let her. "Tell me," he pleaded. "Tell me why you're here." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She sobbed like a child, gasping for air. "Maybe they're right, Jack," she choked out. "I'm not enough. I'll never be enough. And I'm white, Jack. People say we're too similar, that we don't matter, that our love doesn't mean anything." Jack's heart broke as he listened to her. He wiped away her tears, but there was no stopping the flood. The rain continued to pour around them, as if the world itself felt her pain. He pulled her into his arms then, held her tight, like he was trying to hold all the broken pieces of her together. "Helen," his voice was low, steady. "Our love means everything." She buried her face in his chest, shaking. "No," she whispered. "It doesn't. It's just, we're too different. And the world, they don't care. They'll never accept us." Jack's hands cupped her face again, making her look up at him. His eyes were full of raw emotion. "I didn't fall in love with your skin, Helen. I didn't fall in love with your past. I fell in love with your soul, with the way you laugh, the way you care for people, the way you make me feel alive when everything else feels dead." Helen's heart shattered and healed in the same breath. Her tears softened. She could feel his heart beating through his chest, steady and strong. He kissed her forehead gently, pulling her closer. "I don't care about anything the world says. I don't care about the letters or the headlines. I only care about you. Only you." She melted into his arms, letting go of all the pain. She cried until she couldn't cry anymore. And when the rain finally stopped, Jack whispered, "We're going home. Together. Because nothing in this world will ever change how I feel about you." They stood there for a moment longer, in the quiet of the world that was finally still. Then, hand in hand, they walked back to the car. Together. Not just as lovers, but as fighters. The day of their wedding arrived like a breath of fresh air. The sun was warm, the sky a soft blue, and golden lights twinkled in the trees, casting an ethereal glow on everything around them. Helen stood in front of a mirror, staring at the woman she had become, the woman who had fought, loved, and believed in something bigger than herself. She wore a simple white dress, nothing extravagant. It wasn't about the gown. It wasn't about the guests. It was about the promise she was about to make. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the hem of her dress. Her heart fluttered nervously, but she wasn't scared. She was ready. Across the garden, Jack waited. His suit was sharp, but his eyes were soft. He stood at the altar, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. And as Helen walked toward him, everything in the world disappeared. It was just her. It was just him. The world had tried to tear them apart. But this was their moment, a moment that no one could steal. The crowd stood in silence, watching them as they took their steps, one after the other, toward their destiny. The whispers were gone. The judgment was gone. All that remained was their love. Helen reached Jack's side, her eyes full of unshed tears. He smiled at her, softly, as if he couldn't believe this was real. The officiant spoke, but neither Helen nor Jack could hear the words. All they could hear was the beating of their hearts. All they could feel was the fire that had burned between them from the moment they met. When it was time to speak their vows, they both knew they were no longer just promising to love each other. They were promising to stand up for something bigger than themselves. Jack spoke first. His voice was steady, but his words were raw, carrying the weight of everything they had been through. Love isn't about color. It isn't about class. It's about courage. The courage to stand up for what's right, even when the world tells you that you're wrong. Helen, I promise to fight for us, for our love, every single day of my life. Helen's eyes filled with tears as she took his hand in both of hers. She didn't have to think about her words. They came from a place deep inside her, where love lived. You can't define love by money, by background, or by skin, she said softly. You define it by how deeply you're willing to fight for it. I've fought for you, Jack. I've fought for us. And I'll keep fighting every day for the rest of my life. As they exchanged rings, the crowd was silent. No one dared to whisper. The love between them was palpable, real, undeniable. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the world seemed to pause. Jack leaned in and kissed her, not with the urgency of passion, but with the tenderness of a man who knew that this was the most important kiss of his life. The cheers that followed were louder than any media storm they had ever faced. The reporters tried to push forward, desperate for the next headline, but Helen and Jack ignored them. Their love had never been about the spotlight. It had always been about them. It was then that a little girl, no older than 8, rushed forward, her small feet skipping along the grass. She ran straight to Helen, her wide eyes full of wonder. "Excuse me," the girl said, voice soft but confident. "My parents said people like us can't love people like him, but now I know they're wrong." Helen's heart swelled. This was the moment. This was why they had fought. For the future. For the next generation who would grow up believing in love, no matter the color, the background, or the class. Helen knelt down to the little girl's level, her smile wide and full of warmth. She brushed a lock of hair from the girl's face and whispered, "Love always proves people wrong." The little girl smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you for showing me what love really is." Helen hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of the world lifting from her shoulders. The press, the cameras, the world. They all watched in silence. But the only thing that mattered in that moment was the love Helen and Jack shared. As the reception began, people gathered around them. Not just the rich or the famous, but everyone. People from all walks of life came together to celebrate what Helen and Jack had built. The speeches were full of laughter, some heartfelt, some playful, but all marked by a sense of unity and joy. For the first time, The world wasn't just watching them, they were celebrating with them. Later, as the night grew darker and the stars above twinkled like diamonds, Helen and Jack stood together, hand in hand, looking out at the crowd. The music played softly in the background, and they shared a moment of peace, just the two of them. Jack looked at her, his expression soft, his eyes filled with admiration. "You were right," he whispered. "Love always proves people wrong." Helen laughed, a sound so pure and full of joy. "Yes, it does, and we're living proof." As they danced together under the stars, the world seemed to fade away. Nothing mattered but the love between them, and in that love, they found their home. In a world that still quietly divides people by money, class, and race, even among the same race, Jack and Helen proved that true love has no borders. Their love reminded people that no one is too poor, too similar, or too simple to be chosen. They taught a racist society that what truly matters is the heart and the bravery to hold on to love when the world tells you to let go. And all of it started with a joke.